Jason Maxine from Motley Moco talking to one of our Montgomery County student member of the board finalists, Reemey Ghermay. Hi, Reemey. Thanks for talking to us. If you want to start with just giving us an introduction about who you are and why you're running, and then we'll get into the rest of the questions.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. So, my name is Reemey. I'm a junior at Watkins High School in Bethesda, Maryland. I started doing student advocacy when I was in sixth grade, right? I did SGA in my middle school. I ran for secretary my sixth grade year. Unfortunately, I didn't win, but, kept going, kept staying involved. And that brought me to MCJC, which is the Montgomery County Junior Council, a countywide middle school organization that advocates for students on the county level, right? And by being in that organization, I got to hear from so many different students from around the county and got to meet so many different people, learn about different organizations that were doing such great work. And along with that, also knowing that at my own school, a lot of students didn't know about MCJC, about all these organizations and all these people, especially the role of the SMOB, right? So meeting the SMOB, that was such an inspiring part of my life, especially the SMOB when I was in sixth grade. When I was in seventh grade, she ran when I was in sixth grade. Her name was Hana Oluni. So meeting her, getting to hear from her, that she was very inspiring. And years following, all the other SMOBs were very inspiring as well. But I felt like, after the election, we never really got to hear from this mob at our school, right? A lot of students still didn't know who they were, didn't know what the role of this mob was, didn't even know that it existed. And that was really disheartening because that role is really meant to uplift student voices and to ensure that students are heard on the Board of Education. So that's kind of why I'm running. I'm running because I want to ensure that students feel represented, feel like they know who I am. They can talk to me, they can reach out if they have a problem by just staying connected with students and advocating for them and continuing to be involved throughout the year, throughout my term.
Okay, great. Thank you. So we'll start with some short questions, and you can, expand on them how you'd like. So, do you support reinstating final exams?
Yeah, so for final exams, I feel like a big part of school is to prepare you for the future, right? Prepare you for college, whatever careers you might have. And a lot of students in Montgomery County are going to college. So, where like final exams do exist. But with the way that it was implemented this year, after not having final exams in classrooms last year or years after COVID, it felt a little unfair to expect students to adapt to something so quickly and adapt to so many different changes. Like we had our new grading policy with the way grades were calculated, we had final exams, we had a new period of time where we weren't allowed to submit assignments at the end of the quarter, a bunch of new rules about how class was going to look like and how our grades were going to look like, and it felt unfair to have that all at the same time. So I do think that final exams are an important part of preparing students for the future, but I do want to, look more into them, see how successful they were this year, see what the scores were, see how students dealt with having that back in the system, and just, continuing to do school visits and reaching out to students to see what the effective final exams were, and then working from there. Because I think the most important part of being SMOB is sharing what students are feeling about every policy and seeing how it's actually impacting students in practice after having it for this first year.
Okay, great. So you kind of went into this a little bit, but maybe it's similar question. So do you favor the 50% rule, and what are your thoughts on that?
The 50% rule was super important during COVID, I think. I think it was really helpful in helping students adapt to the new format we were in. And a lot of students were losing motivation to do work because of such a stressful time that it was in that period. I do think now it's, I do think that now the way that we have it, where if you do an assignment, if you put effort into it, then you have that 50%, is helpful for students, helping them still continue to move their grade forward, despite having, a hard time on a test or whatever subject they might have. But, without any effort, you still get that 0%, which wasn't in place before, where you would get 50% for every assignment regardless. So
Hmm.
as to whether or not I favor it, I do think it's helpful, but I like the way that we have it now, but I would like to see how it's been impacting students this year with the new grading policy as well, like in combination with that.
Hmm. That makes sense. Always good to look at data. Um, do you support a required financial literacy course?
I Financial literacy, although it's important, I do think adding it as a requirement would be a hindrance to a lot of students who are already struggling to meet those graduation requirements that we already have set. A lot of students aren't getting the support that they need from their counselors to be able to meet those requirements or like proper check-ins they need to meet those requirements that we already have in place with our tech requirement, our health requirement, as it I think changed in the last few years. Um, all the requirements that we already have. I think we should be focusing on ensuring that students are able to meet those within the 4-year period that they have in high school before we implement something new, a new requirement for them to reach. But I do think it should be it should be available at every school, or it should be in addition to another class, not just a financial requirement on its own, but in combination with, maybe, combining it with as a unit in a health class. It's a little bit different from what we're doing in health, but here's something that you might need to know for your future in order to have good financial health as you continue moving forward. But or as a part of a gov class, including that there, like a unit on financial health. But as its own requirement, I do think that it is a hindrance to a lot of students.
Mhm. Do you support SROs and CEOs being in schools?
So, as we've seen in the last, just this year alone, there have been a lot of problems with school safety. We had, I think last week we had an incident at Watkins Mill High School with a student bringing a gun to school. We had our incident with Wooten earlier this year with a student being shot at school. We've had many incidents last year, and it's been really harmful to students to have that kind of stress in their day-to-day lives. I think that we do need to do a better job with security. But on the flip side of that, when we did have SROs, that was a big problem with students as well because of the pipeline to prison pipeline that we had with students, where students didn't feel like they were being treated fairly by SROs and that they were helpful at schools. They were just, causing more stress and more problems at schools, right? So I do not feel like having an SRO in the school building is the most useful way to combat this problem. I do feel like it'd be beneficial to have them maybe around the building, around in the area at all times. I think we do currently have police officers in school areas at all times in case an incident does happen. But within our schools, I think we already saw the issues that it did bring when we had them.
Mhm. Okay, thanks. And this one's a little tricky because it's multi-part, but rank the following factors to look at in terms of importance when discussing boundary studies. And I can repeat these after. Utilization, diversity, proximity, and assignment stability. It's like the four aspects that they look at.
Right. So you said utilization, stability, um, how close it is,
Proximity and
proximity, and
diversity.
diversity. I think that proximity is incredibly important, making sure that students are able to get to school on time, they have that proximity, they have their school community. That's something that's very important and should be, considered first when we're making those boundary assignments, right? And seeing, where does everything fall physically before we get into the other problems or the other issues at play when creating boundaries. Um, can you repeat the other three? I'm so
Yep.
sorry.
Utilization, diversity, and assignment stability.
And by
Assignment stability
utilization,
is utilization is like, you've got 2,000 seats in a school and you've
oh,
got,
oh, I see.
you know,
Okay.
2,100 students or something, and then you need portables. And assignment stability is like uh like you just made a boundary study change to this
Oh,
cohort, and then you're making like another one 3 years later or something like that.
okay. So with that in mind, I would actually have to say assignment stability first. Creating too many different changes at in a close time period is really disruptive to students. I know even with the way we have it right now, where I can speak from personal experience after speaking to students at Tilden this past week. They were very concerned about being moved after, going through freshman and sophomore year at Walter Johnson High School, being moved to Woodward, and how that just affects like the way that you go through your school, right? You are used to one thing and it completely changes. You completely change where you're going to school, the teachers, the kids you're going with. And that's just, I feel like, very harmful for a student on so many levels, not only their grades, but their mental health. Um, I think that's just way too disruptive for students. And then after that, I have to say proximity still. I think proximity is very important. Like I just said, ensuring that students are able to get the most out of their experience by being as close to their school as possible. I know from personal experience, actually applied to Richard Montgomery High School back when I was in 8th grade, to be a part of the IB program there. But although I did get in, I decided that Walter Johnson was a better fit to me because of its proximity. I knew that it'd be stressful to, go to a school that was farther away, to have to deal with, transportation in the morning, especially because I wanted to do a sport at school, because I wanted to do extracurriculars at my school. I knew how disruptive that would be for me and my family. And being in a family with three other kids who were all going through the MCPS system, I knew that would be too much of an issue as well. So I think that's the second um, issue. And then I would have to say utilization is also a very important issue when discussing boundaries. I do think um, I think this goes hand in hand with proximity because, going to Walter Johnson High School, again, I'm speaking on personal experience, but I know this affects students at so many other high schools in the county. We are severely overcrowded. It's just a huge issue. We have many, many portables. Students, it's a challenge, honestly, to get to classes on time. Um, because of how crowded it is. We have, and also just like having portables where you have to go all the way from one side of the school to a portable on the other side of the school. It's outside, it's raining. There's students everywhere. That's a huge problem, and I think that's one of the biggest causes for our current boundary study, right, with Water Johnson and Woodward, is because WJ is so crowded, and because students aren't really getting the most of their experience when they have these huge class sizes, and just an overcrowded school in general. Um, and then I think the last one was diversity. Um,
Hmm.
Diversity, I think isn't it's still incredibly important. I think all of these are still really incredibly important, despite what my ranking is. I think I would put that one there because diversity should be something that we're looking at when creating our school when we're creating our school boundaries, seeing um, where that falls, so that everyone can get can get a full experience, can get a diverse experience in high school. I think that's what makes Montgomery County so strong is our diversity here. One of the most diverse counties, and I think the entire country. Um, but when it comes to, creating these boundaries, I think the biggest problem that we're seeing with the way that our schools are diversity wise is we're seeing some schools not getting the same treatment as others, not getting the same funding and equity as other schools. But if we are able to combat that and we're able to ensure that every school is getting the proper funding, getting the proper tools that it needs to succeed, I think that diversity will not be as big of a problem in the future, that we're not having these huge inequalities, but ensuring that we are maintaining the diversity of our county throughout that process is incredibly important. We should be ensuring that our schools are diverse and they are supporting all of our students in that way as well.
Mhm. Um, so now on to a section about like kind of MCPS discipline. Do you think MCPS gives teachers and admin the ability to effectively discipline students?
I do not think so. I mean, I've talked to so many students during my school visits that have told me about, an issue that they've had where someone was harassing them or bullying them, or something has happened, or someone made a racist or an anti-Semitic comment. And honestly, the response was not really anything. Um, I know a student was telling me about how she filed a report, but it wasn't really followed up on. It wasn't really taken seriously at her school, which I think is just so disappointing um, that that is the case. So I do think that we need to have a better system in place of when we do have these reports at our schools, that we're taking them seriously and that that we are in every single case following up and ensuring that there is the proper protocol done in all those incidents so that MCPS so that teachers can actually follow through and that our staff and our admin and our principals are able to follow through on incidents without just, having to brush it to the side or not really seeing everything that's going on in our schools as well.
Mm. And this kind of leads into our next question, which is, what do you think is and isn't working as far as restorative justice in MCPS?
Yeah, so while I think restorative justice should be the first like measure when an incident is in place, especially with, the school to prison pipeline, we don't want to be proactively um, punishing our students, especially when we don't know the full story. I think first and foremost, investigation, investigating what actually happened, talking to both students, should be what happens first. But restorative justice is incredibly important in ensuring that we are getting the full story, that we are having, a peaceful and restorative school environment, right? Um, but in a lot of cases, that shouldn't be the end. Restorative justice shouldn't be the end. If the incident is more serious than restorative justice can handle, then there should be, there should be punishments for students who are crossing the line in that case. Um, and also for students who again, bring back that story I was talking about earlier with a student who was telling me about how she was harassed at school. They did offer to have restorative justice in place, but she said no because she didn't feel comfortable having a conversation with the person who did harass her. And I think that's perfectly respectable, and I completely understand her perspective on that. But there should have been another method in that case that could have helped her deal with the issue and helped get to the bottom of the situation as well. So I think it really has to be a case by case basis, and that we should be working to be able to create different pathways in cases where there is conflict between students.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's kind of something, right? It's that it's a case, it works for some cases, it doesn't work for everything. And
Mhm.
yeah. And that again goes into our next question, which so I was recently at an MCPS event where they talked about the top two hate bias victim groups in MCPS being African American or Black students and Jews. What do you think can and should be done about the rise of anti-Semitism and racism and other hate in MCPS?
I think the best way to combat these issues is education. I think if we're teaching our students how to respect each other, how to, how to handle differences within our county, how to, handle the diversity that our county brings, that should be the first step. We should be educating our students about how to, how to be respectful of all of students, regardless of their background or what they might look like, right? I know a couple of years ago we had an anti-racist audit in our county. Um, and I'm honestly not really sure what the results of that came to. And I don't feel like maybe this just might be my lack of knowledge on this, but I would really like to know what the results of that anti-racist audit were, what we saw when we did that, and maybe even maybe continue to have that, as we're seeing the rise of these hate incidents in our county, maybe have another anti-racist audit, create more lessons for students as well on how to treat each other, how to be respectful, and make that something that we do earlier on in our education, right? It shouldn't be something that you just, oh, in middle school, we had a lesson about how to respect each other. It should be going back to elementary school because respect for other people is taught at an early age, and the way that we treat each other is taught at an early age. So if we're really commenting that early, I think that is the best way to go about that.
Mhm. And so to go in a kind of different direction here, what do you think should be done about the issues of increasing number of facilities being in poor condition?
Yeah, so this is something that I'm very passionate about. Our infrastructure in our county for our schools has been really struggling. I mean, last week we had the incident at Wooten with a pipe burst, and that was just crazy. It feels like Wooten is going through all of these incidents in one year, which is just so heartbreaking for that community. Um, but no student deserves to be in a school where, your classroom is too hot, it's too cold, you're dealing with like faulty HVAC systems, a ceiling tile breaks or a light goes out or your bathrooms are not working. And that has just become the norm in our county, which is really unfortunate, you know. So, especially in a county with a, seemingly $3.7 billion operating budget next year, that should not be the case. So what I would like to do about this issue is to make sure that we're really prioritizing the schools that are really struggling, that are really having these issues. And then once we do get through the most pressing issues, going ahead and creating those timelines of when things should be updated, like HVAC systems, for example. Every 20 years, those need to be updated just by the way they work, right? So making sure that we're keeping an eye on those timelines to ensure we're not falling behind on updating our schools, ensuring that, we're reaching out to students to see what is the biggest problem at your school in regards to infrastructure? What's something that we can target for you? What's something that we can, fix for you? And along with that, I know the SMOB always does their school visits, so they're actually able to see all the facilities, on a day-to-day basis. I was able to see a bathroom closed, many bathrooms closed around the county, and that's really shaped the way I prioritized my platform as well. But not only, the SMOB doing that or SMOB candidates doing that, but also other board members, superintendent, other county staff, so they can really see what's going on with schools. They can talk to students and see what's going on, and they can really walk through what issues we've been seeing in our county and best address those.
Mhm. And this next question kind of builds on that. So MCPS enrollment has been on a downswing, with the superintendent saying we've lost 10,000 students in recent years. What do you see as the major impacts from this, and how should we handle it?
Yeah, so with our population, our numbers decreasing, um, the impact the impact will likely be I feel as though diversity will be an impact. I feel as though um there have been many impacts, and diversity being one of them. Additionally, like the way that our schools look, I feel like the balance between schools has been definitely an issue. Like I said, WJ is severely overcrowded, but other parts of the county are not. So um, the way that we need to restructure our population to ensure that every school is having an equal amount of people will definitely be something that we have to update. But I would like to, in order to combat this, I would like to, be able to gain more insight into this problem, be able to get more knowledge from how it's actually impacting our schools, working with our different staff members, like our principals, our admin at our schools to see, what the impact of these decreasing numbers has been on our schools and on our staff and on our students as well, so that we can best address them. Because, honestly, from my perspective, it seems like our numbers are only increasing, right? And that's a perspective that we have at one part of the county, where it might be completely different in another part of the county, right? So just being able to work with all of our staff and all of our students to see what the impact is being. And, as SMOB, I would like to be able to get more insight and more knowledge on this and really being able to talk to our staff personally, look at the numbers and come up with a solution for students.
Mhm. So next question, what do you think should be done to help solve our absentee issues in MCPS?
Yeah, so chronic absenteeism has been a major problem throughout these past years, and do feel like this is a multifaceted issue. There are multiple things we need to address in order to combat this. One being targeting why are students absent from school. Mental health, I feel like, has been something that we have not really been seeing a big focus on mental health in the past few years, like we did during like we did during COVID in the years following COVID, with that being one of the main issues we were seeing at the time period, something that was really on the headlines. But what I'd like to do is work with our staff to ensure that we are, making sure students know that they have access to these things. For example, the Bridge to Wellness program, that's at every single MCPS school. Many students don't know about it, so they can't take advantage of that. Ensuring we're, working with our counselors and our school psychologists to ensure that students, oh, sorry, know about their student to counselor, so students know about who their counselor is, who their school psychologist is, and they're able to work with them very well. I apologize.
No, it's fine.
Yeah, and in regards to that, sorry. Yeah, so ensuring they know who their counselors are, who their school psychologists are, so they're able to work with them and they're able to come up with a solution for their mental health. And also, we always say this, trying to decrease that student counselor ratio so that every student can get targeted focus. But then another part of this issue is also, um, what is the effect if you're absent to school? I feel like unexcused absences do not sting as hard for students as they used to. There really isn't any repercussion from not being at school, um, or like we used to see in the past. So I feel like students feel like as though that's okay, as though it's just accepted in our county. When no, students do need to be at school so they can get the most from their education. So working with schools to make sure that we are following through on absences, ensuring that students are actually at school, and that it's not ignored when a student is not in class.
Mhm. Good stuff. So now we're through the hardest questions. We're on to more like the personal, open-ended questions. So what role do you think parents should have in MCPS related issues?
Parents should have a big role in MCPS related issues. Um, most students MCPS, unless you're, a senior in high school, you're under 18. Your parent plays a huge role in your life. Even if you're over 18, your parent plays a huge role in your life, in your education, in the way that your, life at home looks, transportation. There's so many things. There's school impacts parents in so many ways because of the way that it impacts their children. And I feel like they should definitely have a big part of it. And we were especially seeing with, Wooten, how many parents moved to that community for Wooten, for that community. And yeah, it was completely changed around from them. That caused a lot of upset. Um, I know for Walter Johnson High School, there is a community that's very upset that it'll be pretty much broken apart after being so tight knit for so many years because of the new boundaries with Woodward. So they should have a very big role in the way that our county looks. They should, continue to testify at Board of Education meetings. We should be reaching out to parents who may not have the time to testify. I know that's a huge problem. The people who are coming to meetings are people who have that time, have the money, have the ability to actually come out to meetings. So reaching out to students, to parents, my apologies, around the county, to ensure that we're actually hearing from them, hearing about how it's impacting them, how it's impacting their home life. But again, as a SMOB, I do feel as though the biggest role for me kind of to not focus on the parents, but mostly on the students, seeing how it impacts them, what they feel about the issues, um, and how it's impacting their life. Although their parents do have a big role in it and should have a big role in it.
For sure, for sure. You are going for SMOB, so it makes sense.
Mhm.
What next question is what issues do students find important that are not being discussed by MCPS, the Board of Education, and the county at large?
So the biggest thing that comes to mind for me is bathrooms, right? Bathrooms being closed. I've heard this consistently at every single visit I've been on, middle or high school. Oh yeah, the bathrooms are always closed. I always have to walk around for like 10 minutes to find the bathroom that's open at my school. And I feel like that's not been really an issue we talk about with the adults on the boards of education or with the other adults, the other community leaders that we've seen in our county. But it is a huge issue. It impacts students on so many levels. Not only are you not able to just go to the bathroom wherever you are in the school, but it impacts, how long you're out of class for. It impacts, if you are, if you are, how long you're in class for. It impacts um your like if you're a student and you're on your period, right? Where are you gonna go? We need to get there fast. There's an issue with that. If you're feeling sick, you need to go to the bathroom. That's also something that is hugely impacted. Students' wellness, well-being is severely impacted by bathrooms being closed, right? And yet it hasn't really been talked about. I feel like, or not talked about enough with the adults. Um, and then a lot, but I do feel like the reason why bathrooms are being closed, so many students have told me, and just from my own personal experience, is because of substance abuse, and that hasn't been targeted. We're closing bathrooms to try to solve this issue, but that's not helping the problem, right? If a student is going to be on substances, if they're going to be, smoking during class or using a vape during class, closing a bathroom, they'll still find a way around it. That's not actually targeting the issue. Students will still continue to be doing those things, just in another place. So
Hmm.
what we actually need to be doing instead of closing bathrooms is, increasing mental health support, increasing awareness about substance abuse, increasing the resources that students have to get through this issue, increasing security so that they're able to manage all the bathrooms in the school, not just closing a bathroom and expecting that everything will get better when we do that.
Hmm. So this one's kind of a fun one. So if the school board gave you $1 million to spend on schools as you wish, what would you do? So not like, completely separate from like, I know it's kind of small compared to like the big budget, but like if you just had that for one specific, uh, you know, outreach or task that you wanted to do, what do you think it would do?
I mean, we just talked about it, but keeping those bathrooms open, I feel like
Bathrooms? Yeah.
yeah, that's been something that has really, I've heard t like day in and day out talking to students has been those bathrooms, getting them open. It's just been a huge issue. So, and there's so much we can do to solve it. Like I was saying, increasing security, increasing mental health for students, mental health support and awareness, increasing um, awareness and support for substance abuse for students. Um, and there's just so many different things that we can do, and it would solve so many issues if we were to target the bathroom issue. If we're able to implement those things that I just mentioned, not only would it keep bathrooms open, it would also maybe even increase absenteeism, students feeling more comfortable at school, they're feeling more their mental health is increasing. They'll be at school more. They're able to get through their assignments. They're able to be, a stronger part of their school community. I do feel as though that would be really important, and I know many students would be very grateful, including myself at WJ. It's also an issue, but yeah.
Uh-huh. And you've talked about, mental health a few times. What do you do for self-care and how would you work to promote school life balance for all students?
Yeah, so I know it's been a little difficult, throughout this mob election to really maintain that balance. There's been a lot going on, but for me, just what works for me is just reminding myself, giving myself time to do other things, to pursue like, whatever makes me happy at specific times, not just focusing on, the election or the school. That's been really helping me throughout this election. And also just the support of my friends and family and the staff at my school have been very supportive. Like my teachers, my counselor has been very supportive, my principal's been very supportive of me running for SMOB. And, you know, support from other people is so important, which is why I was talking earlier about, counselors and psychologists. That support is so important for students to be able to have that mental health support. The Bridge to Wellness program has some great staff a part of it. They have great resources for students as a part of that. So ensuring that we do have that support for students when they need it and they actually know how to get it, right? It shouldn't be a scavenger hunt. Like you have to go online, find all these different resources at your school in order to get support. It should be something that we're giving to students. We're able to provide them with that without them asking in order to ensure that they are succeeding as students. Um, and along with that, actually something that I'm very passionate about is like wellness days for students. I know a lot of schools have advisory wellness periods, or wellness periods during class. So increasing that or ensuring that that's remaining a part of the school day and just increasing support for that and ensuring that we have it at every school is super important in order to allow students to catch up, take a deep breath, and get through you know, school and whatever that brings for them.
Okay, thanks. So just a couple questions left. So what do you think is the most pressing issue that's at your school specifically, and how do you think that differs from schools in other parts of the county?
Yeah, so at my school, I touched on this a bit earlier, but overcrowding is a huge issue. I mean, WJ, we have over 3,000 students in our school, in a facility that isn't built for that, right? We're not built to have 3,000 students. We have like 10 portables outside, maybe even more in order to maintain that size of class, right? Um, and it's just been overcrowding has just been a huge problem. Class sizes have been a problem. Getting to and from class is always a struggle. Like there's some staircases that it's like a sea of people. It's so hard to get through. And students have been consistently late because of that, That's just a huge problem that we've seen at my school. And yeah, that really differs at other schools because I know some schools are, under that class size, um, that class their school's, ability to handle students, right? That utilization that we were talking about earlier. Some
Yep.
schools are under that, and it's not equal at schools. Other schools in the county definitely do not struggle with that issue. They have a much smaller number of students, and I do know that's what the boundary study is hoping to accomplish, and I hope that it does accomplish that, and that we are seeing it get better it get better, although it is after I graduate. But yeah,
Yeah.
that's a huge problem. I know at other schools, I've always asked students, the one question I always ask is, if you could change one thing at your school, what would it be? If you could change just one thing, and I've heard many different things. I've heard the school lunch options. I'm a student who I'm vegetarian and I can't eat anything, and I struggle with that as well. I have celiac disease. Sometimes I can barely eat school lunches since I was in third grade when I got diagnosed, and it's just like it's not fair for so many students. I've heard bathrooms being closed again at many schools. That's the case. Middle schools, phones during lunch. That's always a huge issue with them. Um, every school has its own thing, and I do hope that I can find the most common ones and be able to target them during my term, but also just prioritize what I'm hearing the most and being able to accomplish that for students.
Great. So last thing is just could you give us like a closing bit on yourself, where to find your campaign, dates of the election, and stuff like that?
Yeah, so like I was saying before, I've been in so many students' shoes where I feel like, you vote for this mob and then the next year everything's the same. It feels like the Board of Education is making decisions that don't align with student voices, don't align with what we want, and problems still remain untouched. Our school lunches don't really get better. Our bathrooms still remain closed. We still don't have stocked menstrual dispensers in our bathrooms. Toilet paper is missing, soap's missing. Um, you know, our mental health is declining. We don't really know where to get support. And just feel like those issues aren't really being targeted. Um, but I want to be someone who is working with students. A huge part of my campaign, something that I've always wanted to do and dreamt about, is having a small month, is having more communication with students, being able to not only visit them, but have them know who I am by having a small monthly minute every month to ensure that they know who I am. They're seeing my face. They can see what we've done on the Board of Education and know that their voices are being heard, right? That I do care about them and I care about every single problem that they have. And I want to do my best to fix that. And if I don't fix it, I will ensure that the next mob knows about it and they can continue to support students as well. It has been a dream of mine since I first heard about what the SMOB was, since I first met Hana Oluni back in the day, and just felt so passionate, and just seeing how passionate she was, how inspiring she was, that made me want to continue down this path. And I'm so thankful to be where I am now as a finalist after being nominated at the SMOB Nominating Convention. And I'm so excited to see where this may go. The election coming up very, very soon. I'm super excited to continue talking to students, continue seeing them at their schools, continue DMing them, messaging them on Instagram, on TikTok, whatever it might be. And yeah, so on that note with Instagram and TikTok, feel free to reach out to me. I'm welcome to any question, any comment, any concern, just telling me, oh, come visit my school. I'd love to see you. Yeah, I'd love to see you too. Feel free to continue to do that. My social media is Reemey, which is Reemey, the number four, and then SMOB on all my platforms. You can also reach out to me through my email, which is again Reemey for SMOB, the number four, at gmail.com, and my website, which is also Reemey, the number four, smob.com. So, and my email and all my information is on the website as well, along with my platform and my experience, which is also on my Instagram. So, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate this. Um, and thank you all so much for listening as well.
Thank you so much for coming out, and yeah, we'll see you soon.
Thank you.